Hey guys, what's going on? It is Filmington. In this video, we are going to talk about soccer.
Konate launches it low. Koulibaly saved!
We just had probably one of the most entertaining World Cup final matches ever, and it doesn't matter because nobody saw it. Yes, that's exaggeration, but I think there's a little bit of truth to that, to be honest. So, what happened to soccer, guys? Because I was at the National this past year, and I talked to a group of younger kids that had soccer in their display case, and I was asking them, I'm like, listen, like, I mean, I didn't spell it out completely for them because I was more interested in hearing what they had to say instead of telling them what I thought the issue was. So I was like, where's like the ramp up? There should be a lot of hype with the World Cup coming around. It's a pretty big tournament. It happens once every 4 years. It's the biggest soccer tournament. And their response was, oh, gas prices are expensive. People are broke right now. They don't have the money. I get it. My issue, though, was relative to other sports, why wasn't soccer outperforming those? Because if you look at other sports where the season is once per year, so baseball, football, basketball, etc., usually there's a little bit of a ramp up in hype and interest right before that season starting. So in my eyes, I get that soccer is year round. I get that there are multiple tournaments. It's not just about the World Cup, but the World Cup has always been the biggest one, especially with regard to the impact on the hobby. And I was wondering, like, first quarter, second quarter of 2022, that should have been the time. That should have been the equivalent of, like, the January, February offseason for Major League Baseball with regards to interest building, anticipation building. And I don't know, just didn't really see it. But to be fair, we'll look at some data in a little bit, and my observations weren't really affirmed by the data itself, which is interesting. But first of all, when soccer was starting to boom in 2019, 2020, I had some reservations about the market because of two reasons. First of all, I didn't believe there was enough interest in this country for either domestic or international soccer. So I'm in the US. I questioned how much people that live in the US cared about soccer, either MLS or international soccer. And that translates a little bit to the percentage or the amount of collectors that there could be inside this country, inside the United States of America. My second reservation had to do with the number of international buyers. So talking about the folks that live outside of the US, how many of those people are actually buying soccer cards? Some of these are poor countries. Some have money. But Europe, Asia, South America, are they really interested in soccer cards? Maybe stickers, I get that. That's also a market I don't understand. But how much are they really interested in the cards themselves? So if you look at some previous World Cups, I don't focus on soccer on this channel, and I don't proclaim myself to be an expert, but I was around in 2014 in the hobby, and I was buying soccer cards in 2014, and I observed what happened, and it wasn't very good. I had picked up a bunch of 2014 Prism autos of guys like James Rodriguez, probably a bad example because he peaked at that point. Luis Suarez, Messi, Ronaldo, those types of guys. Some of the players on the U.S. national team at the time, Clint Dempsey, Howard, Altidore, and after that World Cup ended in 2014, where the U.S. qualified, prices came down. You look at some examples right here.
2014 base Prism PSA 10s.
Now, maybe this isn't the best product to look at because it could have also fallen because the product was maybe overinflated. Maybe it's because people realized, oh, there's really a lot of them out there, and the interest in the product, because it was newer at the time, waned after the World Cup. So it just looks like prices are falling afterwards, and it's just a coincidence. Maybe it also helps at the time, looking at some other factors. 2014, I think that's when ESPN took on the World Cup, the coverage, and I think that helped kind of promote it. Now the perception of ESPN has gone downhill quite a bit, but in 2014, it being covered by ESPN, I think was a big deal. It definitely brought it out to more people. So then you look at 2018, the most recent World Cup before the one that we just saw. The U.S. didn't qualify in 2018, and that was a big deal. That was a big problem. So if you were to look at some of the more, I guess, like investable cards, so 03, 04 mega cracks, look at Ronaldo, look at Messi, it really hurt the soccer card market afterwards. You'll see that the prices of those fell. Sure, it ended up falling afterwards to a point that was higher than where it started in some cases, but it still ended up falling after the World Cup. And you see that anticipation. You see prices kind of rising into the World Cup a bit. And I remember the cards I was holding took a big dive as well because of 2018 and because of US not qualifying. So a lot of people are saying, well, soccer is international. And it probably is a lot more international now, talking about the card market, not the sport. The sport's always been international. But back in 2018, the cards were very US dependent. And if the U.S. didn't qualify, that was a big deal. And to be frank, I was a little concerned about people not talking about it this time around. It's like, well, I guess I get it. Like, a lot of you weren't around in 2018, but there was a chance that the U.S. didn't qualify or wouldn't qualify, and that was always baked in that they would, and they ended up qualifying. They had a stronger team this time around. I get it. So going back to the argument of the ramp up, Q1, Q2 of 2022, I thought that would be when we'd see prices spike or at least move up. If not on an absolute basis, I thought they would at least outperform other sports. And if you look at this index that I created with Card Ladder, I looked at cards from 2017 and later, between $100 to $1,000, PSA 10s, all the cards in their database. And if you're to look at this, what I did was I wanted to take the time period before the World Cup and go back 1 year. So November 1st, 2021 through November 1st, 2022. And you'll see that the index did not do well. And it didn't do particularly well versus most of the other major sports. F1 had its own issues, and that started to collapse earlier. But looking at this chart again, what I noticed was actually all the steam came out of the soccer bubble, maybe Q1, early Q2, and then prices were fairly flat afterwards. So that was interesting. So I thought that soccer didn't outperform other sports, but in the most recent time sample, right before the World Cup, prices did seem to be flat. But still, soccer did, I think, disappoint based on what the World Cup could and should have done to it. So I'm trying to think, like, what's the reason for that? Do not enough buyers of soccer cards know about the World Cup, or maybe they don't care about the World Cup? And I'm not trying to be negative about that. Maybe just there's just less attention on the World Cup relative to some of the other tournaments. It being a year-round sport, people knowing more about some of those other tournaments now than maybe they did in 2018 or 2014. Maybe that has a reason for the lack of build-up for this World Cup. Maybe there's more international demand for soccer now than there was in 2018. So maybe it doesn't matter as much what the U.S. does, so them qualifying, them maybe making it to the quarterfinals, maybe that doesn't matter as much because there could be more international demand. By that I mean buyers that exist outside of the U.S. that are buying cards versus in 2018 or 2014. Maybe the timing of the tournament being in November, December, also competing with America's favorite sport, American football. Maybe that was too much of a distraction, maybe a little bit off-putting, and that hurt the ability for hype to build up. Maybe Haaland not being in the World Cup was a little problematic. His team didn't qualify, and him and Mbappe seem to be like those two young, I don't want to call them GOATs, but premium players a lot of people are putting a lot of money into, elite players. Or was there too much opposing force from the downside factors like the economy, like inflation, like discretionary income, like the card market getting smoked as a whole? We talked about people front-running soccer years in advance, trying to put money into it like it was the next big card market, even though it wasn't very well established. People seem to do something similar to F1 as well. So I don't want to knock on soccer too much. I want to talk about some things that were very productive for the soccer market that transpired over the last, 1 to 3 years. First of all, let's talk about the increase of products. I think that's really important. It's something that doesn't get covered a whole lot. But in 2014, based on my data, there were only 4 to 5 different sealed products for soccer, and that includes stickers. 2018, my source says 12 to 13 products. So from 2014 to 2018, still not that many products, but those about tripled. So in about 4 years, those tripled. In 2021, I'm showing 31 to 35 different products based on how you separate and count those. So that's about tripling of the 2018 number. And then in 2022, assuming that there's no more to come out, I'm showing about 45, right around 45 different sealed products. So that's 10x since 2014, about 4x since 2018. But here's the thing, more products doesn't necessarily equate to being more demand for singles. Yes, there will usually be, one can't really go up without the other. I get that, but it doesn't mean that it's a perfect one-for-one correlation. Some of the folks that might have been opening soccer, I'm just throwing theories out there, but maybe they were priced out of breaks from more expensive products like basketball and football. So I guess there's more belief nowadays that soccer is a mainstream card market. You won't get laughed at for taking your soccer singles out of your Pelican case like you would have probably 3 years ago, to be honest. You're going to bring it to shows, and there's probably going to be some demand for your cards from the right buyer. There are flippers in the soccer market. There are collectors, maybe even long-term collectors in the soccer market. But you have to really break this down because soccer is on the rise with regards to popularity as a sport in this country based on the stats we're looking at. A lot of the people that own soccer today are new to it. So you have to question long-term intentions, convictions. So I'm not talking about necessarily just long-term investing or collecting. I'm talking about both here. From a collecting standpoint, they're either new to the sport or they're new to the cards. So how much of an emotional attachment will they have to said players? How likely are they to be still holding these cards 10 years from now? That's kind of what I'm getting at. Because soccer is a bigger market today, but it's also one that has grown quite a bit relative to some of the other sports. It's one that really wasn't that large at all in 2014. The other part of this is from a purely investment standpoint, what is the track record for these cards over time? We don't really know yet because, again, it's a newer market. So that could affect people's convictions, people's, returns projections. It could lead to maybe more uncertainty, a little bit more doubt. And it could unfortunately hurt people's ability to hold these cards long term if they're thinking about it from a purely monetary investment standpoint. So I think a few things that are going for soccer that are positive. You've got, of course, more and more people realizing that it's a year-round sport. It's not just about the World Cup or even the Euro Cup. There's meaningful games. You might not be able to watch all of them because of the time zone issue, which could be a material issue for developing an emotional connection to different players and teams. But there is an ability to kind of watch those games, and those games matter. They're significant, and they happen all throughout the year, and they can affect values. We started to see that, I think, in 2020. Goals, players switching teams. There's meaningful events that happen outside of those tournaments that can affect short-term and long-term outlooks for a player's value. Another thing, Topps kind of cleaned up the way that they handle rookie cards. They added RC logos on some of the newer sets. I think they started doing this, last year? So that's helping people understand a hierarchy for which cards are the most important. Another thing that is helping soccer, there are very, very strong GOAT players or GOAT-like players that are still playing. So a lot of people right now have Messi in their top, 2 of all time, top 1, up there with Maradona. Some people have Pele up there. Some people even have Ronaldo in their top, probably 2 to 3. And you've got Messi and Ronaldo both technically still playing, and that's very good for the sport. You've got these new potential generational type guys like Mbappe and Haaland. This could certainly be a beneficial factor for soccer to continue to grow. Now, a lot of people think Mbappe is overrated in real life. Some of that might be unfair because he is compared to Messi. Different positions. So Mbappe is not really expected to be as dynamic and well-rounded because he's a striker, but he does get compared to some of those other players. I feel like people that are in the hobby don't call Mbappe overrated, but people that are a fan of the sport often say that. And at some point, you'd think that that would bleed into the investability of Mbappe. I don't know. Going back to one of the original points, 2014, 2018, we're still at a period right now after the World Cup where prices could continue to fall in the short term within the next 6 months, within the next 12 months. We do have the World Cup, of course, coming to the U.S. in 2026, or all of North America, Mexico, and Canada as well. That should be a good thing. But in this hobby, guys, what I've learned is that 4 years is an eternity. So I wouldn't start to try to get out in front of that, especially as prices haven't really begun to fall after the World Cup. So looking back at the last, few weeks after the World Cup ended, very interesting. But looking at that same index, prices are flat. So that is interesting, something to continue to monitor, of course. Last point I want to make is that there's been a lot of people out there with very insightful data about how soccer is inexpensive relative to other sports. If you were to look at like top 100 cards of a GOAT versus top 100 cards of a certain other player, and if you were to look at like the value of their 100th card, the other sports are, you could say, overvalued or just valued higher than soccer, but maybe there's a reason for that. And we're not going to get into that in today's video, but if I was to, bring up this observation, maybe it would be valuable to you. Football, by far, I'm talking about American football, is the most popular sport to watch in this country, and it's not even close. It's not even close. But look at where the cards sell relative to other sports. Even if, now I'm going to switch to soccer, even if soccer was to gain momentum versus the other American sports, it doesn't necessarily mean that the cards will also go up in value. It doesn't necessarily mean that. I mean, look at baseball relative to football with regards to the popularity of the sport in this country and popularity of the cards. So looking at some of the other sports, they've got global markets, so they tend not to be apples to apples. But baseball, predominantly, cards are getting purchased and they're desired within this country. And the same thing with American football. And look at how those cards sell relative to one another. And look at the different popularities of those sports and their trajectories that they're on, right? Baseball right now is maybe the opposite of soccer, where it's slowly creeping down, soccer's slowly creeping up. So that is it for today's video. Hopefully you liked what you saw. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that disagree vehemently with what I had to say, but I'm curious. I've been trying to make sense of this. One of the reasons why I've taken such a long time to put this out is because I've been wanting to hear other people's takes, to be honest. LAFC Gooner from Instagram. Anybody that has a half-informed view, LAFC Gooners got a more than half-informed view, but I'm just trying to put it all together in my head because it doesn't make sense. But again, I was around in 2014. I still have some 2014 soccer cards, and I was around for 2018 as well. All right, guys, that's it. Take care. Filmington out. Happy New Year.